The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello, and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, you know what's nice, Beth?
What, dear?
This week, we're back to 2 stories for an episode.
We are. We've been focusing on one story for several weeks now.
Well, because there's been so much to cover.
Yes.
That it was able to go one long episode. But this week we thought we'd switch things up and go back to our 2 stories format.
Yeah, which was kind of exciting for me.
I know. I have my own story again. And I'm pretty excited because tonight you're talking about a mysterious place.
I am. And you're talking about a cryptid, one of your favorite things to talk about.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite things. And I don't think a lot of people have heard about this one.
Maybe not.
But I guess we'll find out. Or we won't. If nobody leaves any feedback, we really don't know what you have all heard of before out there. So, if you like this episode, go ahead and give us a 5-star review and leave a comment.
Yeah, so we know how we're doing.
Yeah, and not only that, I think we're doing pretty damn good. But, leave a comment probably and let us know if you've heard of this cryptid before.
Or this place. Maybe you've been to this place.
Oh, that's true. I totally forgot about your story because I got so excited about mine.
I know. You're all focused on your story for the episode. You totally forgot that there's a whole half that comes before that.
I know. Something of my very own again.
All right. Well, I'm going to get started so that you can get to your story.
That sounds great.
Okay. So all of you listening out there, you know that first and foremost, before anything else, that I am a huge history nerd. And when experts come across historical sites that they just can't explain, well, that's one of my favorite things in the entire world because I love it when historical sites kind of stymie us and they remind us that we just aren't as smart as we think we are. Gungywamp in Groton, Connecticut is one of those places. And since we haven't talked about a weird or mysterious place in quite a while, I decided that for tonight's episode, I'm going to dive right in. But to get there, we have to go into the woods. It's an unlikely place to find 22 mysterious stone structures laid out over 100 acres, but I promise you they are there. Stone chambers, stone bridges, cairn fields, rings of standing stones, Native American artifacts, colonial artifacts, mysterious etchings, and thousands of years of various settlements rearranging the site have made for some heated debates in archaeological circles. Is Gungywamp Native American, or is it a pre-Columbian settlement built by 6th century Celtic monks who escaped the Vikings in Ireland and arrived in Connecticut thousands of years before we generally agree that Europeans arrived? Or is Gungywamp somehow related to aliens? Now, before you roll your eyes, let me just tell you, magnetometers that measure electromagnetic frequencies tend to go a little nutty out at Gungywamp, which makes very little sense since, like I said, it's out in the middle of the woods. Geologists will tell you that it's simply coming from the quartz, granite, and magnetite rocks that are all around you. But there are those who think that that cannot be the reason. To begin with, experts don't even know where Gungywamp got its name from. Some say Gungywamp, which is very fun to say.
It has a ring to it.
It's just fun.
Gungywamp.
Gungywamp.
It's kind of like bat squatch.
It is like bat squatch.
Since we've been doing this podcast, we've come across some pretty cool names that just kind of stick in your mind.
I know. Gungywamp is one of them. So some experts say that Gungywamp means place of ledges in Mohegan. Others point out that it means swampy place in Pequot. The Mohegan and the Pequot did live in that area for centuries, so that makes sense. For those who believe the Irish monk theory, they point out that it means Church of the People in Gaelic. And finally, Gungywamp could just be an English corruption of the phrase spongy swamp. That's the thing. Nobody really knows for sure why it's called Gungywamp. According to Atlas Obscura, a lithic pounding stone found at Gungywamp dates back to 1500 BC. And there are arrowheads and pottery fragments that certainly point to indigenous people living there as far back as 4,000 years ago. But the multiple stone chambers at Gungywamp are what really throw archaeologists, because they just can't figure out what they were for. Initially, they assumed they were colonial-era root cellars, except one of them has a window, and it lines up perfectly with the fall and summer equinoxes. And what about the rock ledge known as the Cliff of Tears, where many visitors have become overwhelmed by sudden and inexplicable feelings of sadness and depression? So, what's going on at Gungywamp? Your guess is as good as mine, but it's definitely intriguing. First, there are two separate areas called the North and South complexes, filled with 22 different stone structures. Both the North and South complexes include a high cliff, a swamp, and a brook. In the South complex are 2 rows of standing stones, each made up of 24 to 29 still existing stones. There are some empty post holes and additional broken stones in the row. The north row is very badly eroded, so much of the study has been done on the south row, which is in better condition. According to stonestructures.org, the south row stones start out shorter at both ends and gradually get taller as they meet in the middle. They are also placed so that they created an elliptical arc that bows out towards the east. One of the post holes on the far east side has been covered over with a stone paving with a bird's head carved onto it, with its beak pointing east as well. Now, the elliptical arc doesn't just point east. It also forms a crescent shape. And based on the phases of the moon, it's been suggested that these standing stones worked as a sort of astrological calendar that kept track of the moon's cycle. And based on where the rows are, at certain times of year, they could have lined up perfectly with the moon's beam that may have shone across the nearby swamp. Some archaeologists believe that this was obviously built by indigenous people for moon ceremonies, and that the covered post hole would be opened up during the ceremonies so the tribal leader could insert some sort of staff into the hole. This theory is supported by the fact that there's a second bird effigy carved into one of the larger standing stones, with its wings spread and its beak pointing east. There's also a small crescent-shaped line etched into one of the bird's wings. Later excavations revealed a row of paving or cobblestones, like a sidewalk, laid out along the standing stones. But archaeologists who argue that Gungywamp can't be thousands of years old have their own theories about those standing stones. They say that the 2 rows of upright stones are all that's left of a colonial-era stone wall. Or they're all that's left of feed boxes, hide tanning stretchers, or livestock corrals. There's a reason there's so many options, because none of them seem to exactly fit. Then there are the various stone bridges at Gungywamp. Now, they define bridge as any large stone slab laid horizontally across 2 upright stones, creating a void underneath. There are several of these across the site, and so far, no one has had any conclusive theories for what they were used for. Several of the stone bridges also have singular standing stones in close proximity. But even more puzzling are the cairn builds. First, there is a cairn field made up of 17 distinct cairns. Although the rock shapes are all different, some are round, some rectangular, and some even tear-shaped, that's not what makes each cairn unique. Whoever built them put all of the rocks of a certain type together. So, for example, one cairn is made up entirely of slab rocks, another is made up entirely of cobbled rocks, and so on. And since no artifacts have been found anywhere around the cairn field, it's impossible to say how long they've been there. Then there's the boat cairn. Archaeologists named it that because it looks like a boat. It narrows into points at both ends and it's wide in the middle. There are 3 triangular standing stones embedded upright in the structure too, one at either end and one in the middle. And then there is a string of water-washed quartz pieces lined up the middle. The boat cairn lies directly north-south. So, these are all placed there for specific reasons, pointing to cardinal points. They're there for a reason. Not far from the boat cairn is the 3rd cairn structure, which sits at the base of a natural rock ledge. And then, as if the makers of the cairns wanted to mark exactly where they were, they erected 3 large standing stones outside the cairn structures. 2 are side by side on a ledge above the boat cairn, and the 3rd is behind a stone wall on the south side of the cairn field. When connected with lines on a map, these 3 standing stones perfectly encompass the 3 cairn builds. Why? Nobody knows.
Well, that's why it's a mystery.
That's why I love it. They don't know. The general consensus is that all of this was built by Native Americans thousands of years ago. And as I mentioned before, a lot of Native American artifacts have been found there, indicating that this is 100% true.
Or perhaps it was a site that somebody else inhabited and the Native Americans built upon it.
Well, I'm going to get into that theory. There's the Irish monk theory that they were here thousands of years before that.
Really?
Yes, they were trying to escape the Vikings. Were you not listening to me when I started my story?
I was thinking. As you were reading, I was paying attention, but my mind was wandering.
Yeah, I was going to say. So, next, there's the mysterious stone chambers that I had mentioned. And there's a double stone circle that don't quite fit into the Native American narrative. So, there are 4 stone chambers in the South Complex at Gungywamp. 2 of them are in pretty bad shape, but the other 2 are in pretty good condition. The chambers range from just under 5 feet long to 15 feet long, between 4 to 7 feet wide and 3 to 6 feet high. 2 of the chambers have corbelled walls, or walls built with layered overlapping stones. Many experts argue that these stone chambers were not built by Native Americans, but by the colonists who came there after 1780. But even if that's true, it doesn't explain what they were used for and why some of them have windows that line up perfectly with the solstices and the equinoxes. But here are some of their theories. Now, the most obvious one that they throw out is that the colonists used these stone chambers as root cellars. Now, typically, stone root cellars from the colonial era were built in very dry places, and their roofs were made of wood. If they were prone to dampness, there would be some sort of drainage system put into it, because the whole point is to keep your vegetables dry. All 4 of the stone chambers at Gungywamp had stone slabs for roofs. They have no drainage systems. And most important of all, 3 of the 4 aren't even big enough for a human to stand up in. So, experts said, okay, perhaps these stone chambers were used as sheep birthing chambers. The only problem with this theory is that, like I said, none of the chambers are big enough to fit a sheep that's having a sheep and a farmer, let alone leaving any room for mucking the thing out. And they couldn't stand up in them. So it's kind of hard to help a sheep give birth when you can't even stand up.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all.
No. A third theory is that they were used as colonial ice houses. Except if that were true, they would have been really, really bad ones, because ice houses, again from the colonial era, were built with double walls, double entry doors, airtight walls, and they had floor drains, features that none of these 4 chambers have.
Well, it just sounds like they're throwing anything they can at the wall and hoping it sticks.
Yes, because in addition to all the Native American artifacts, they know that colonial era people did live at Gungywamp because they've dug up dozens of colonial era artifacts. So it's kind of like they are trying to hammer the pieces in until it fits.
Right. But taking over and living in these things, kind of repurposing them, is different to who first built them and what intentions they had.
Right. So some experts that are arguing that the chambers really were Native American built have looked at other indigenous sites to see if they had stone chambers too. And, of course, some of them do. I think the most telling feature that proves that they could be Native American is that inside one of the chambers is a triangular piece of white stone, and it's embedded in the back wall up near the top. And a similar white stone was found embedded in a stone chamber at America's Stonehenge. And experts there agree that it symbolized the native people's beliefs that this white stone would block spirits from entering the chamber from the outside, and it allowed them to enter the chamber from a portal. So, it's very similar. But the large double stone circle at Gungywamp most definitely does seem colonial. The two concentric circles that make up this double stone circle are made of quarried, convex or concave stone slabs laid end to end exactly 11 inches apart. The bigger circle is made up of 12 slabs with a diameter of just under 11 feet. The smaller inner circle is made of 9 slabs with a diameter of just under 9 feet. All of the stones in this huge concentric circle, double circle, show wear patterns as though they were continuously walked upon and had a large stone wheel pushed across them. Artifacts found around the circles include colonial-era redware pottery, a 19th century iron button, hammerstones, and scrapers. This, coupled with the nearby stone hearth that was excavated in the 1990s, leads experts to believe that the double stone circles were part of a colonial grinding mill.
It certainly sounds it.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
And in other parts of the Gungywamp sites, archaeologists have discovered the ruins of colonial houses and storage facilities, strewn with shards of china, coins, buttons, glass bottles, window pane glass, utensils, tobacco pipes, and bricks. And yet, based on the number of Native American artifacts found at the double stone circle, some experts insist that they built those before the settlers arrived, too. The hammerstones that I mentioned could actually be older than the 18th century, and there's evidence that Native cultures did heat rock and use hammerstones to pound larger stones. So the natives could have made the convex and the concave stones in the double circle. So what was once a native settlement was seemingly taken over by the colonists, which isn't a surprising thing, but it does mean that there are still a lot of questions about the 22 stone structures. Now, I said before that I would talk about the Irish monk theory, which my husband didn't hear me say.
I can't. I have nothing to say.
So, the Irish monk theory is quite controversial, I have to say, and it was put forth by avocational archaeologist David Barron. So, I had to look that up. An avocational archaeologist means that he's not a professional archaeologist. He doesn't have a degree in archaeology, but that he studies archaeology and archaeological sites as a hobby. So he has experience at archaeological digs. He just isn't a guy with a degree.
Well, I don't necessarily think you have to have a degree to be an expert in something. It's about putting the time in and learning. But to have a piece of paper on the wall says you've got a degree in something, I don't think that makes him any less, his opinion's less valuable.
I agree. So, David Barron calls attention to 7 petroglyphs that are carved into stones at Gungywamp. And full disclosure, I tried all different Google searches and phrasing things different ways, and I couldn't find any pictures of any of these petroglyphs. But I'm going to take his word for it that they're there. I mean, we know that there's the 2 bird effigies, so I'm assuming that there's other carvings there. According to an IrishCentral.com article, there are 4 chiros, or capital P's with a capital X through the stem, that I'm sure you've all seen on ancient Celtic ruins and in Christian religious artifacts. There's 1 Byzantine Greek symbol, and there is an uppercase R and lowercase r combo. And then the 7th petroglyph is a stylized eagle. He believes that these carvings and what he thinks the concentric stone circles were used for, Irish leather tanning, help corroborate a letter he came across from 1654. In the letter, John Picton of Springfield, Massachusetts, wrote that there was already a, quote, strange stone settlement at Gungywamp. Barron has proposed that perhaps Gungywamp is where Saint Brendan of Irish myth landed in North America in 700 A.D. He also points to the largest of the stone chambers, which measures 14 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 6.5 feet tall. He says the chamber is strikingly similar to ones found in County Kerry, Ireland, from the same time period. Interestingly, the sun comes through the chamber's doorway at sunrise on the first day of spring and strikes the chamber's opposite corner. And at sunset, it comes through the window and lights up a side chamber, just like they do in Ireland. So, in this scenario, Irish monks escaping the Viking hordes built Gungywamp. Then Native Americans took it over, and then colonists took it over. I mean, I had mentioned earlier, Gungywamp, supposedly, means Church of the People in Gaelic. The only major kink in this theory is that so far, amongst the hundreds of artifacts that have been found at Gungywamp, none of them are Viking, and none of them before 1780 are European at all. And that's honestly why I love places like Gungywamp. It's an historical site with a lot of cool artifacts, tons of questions, and hopefully some answers still waiting to be unearthed. In 2018, the ownership of Gungywamp was transferred to the state of Connecticut, and it became a state archaeological preserve in 2023. You can certainly go visit if you want to. All of the entrance fees go directly to the preservation, excavation, and research of the site.
That's awesome that the proceeds go towards preserving the site and doing the excavation.
Yeah, it's very cool because it's funneling it back into the research, which,
I think they really need to get into the media and start pushing this so people visit the place.
Yeah. What a neat place.
It is very cool.
Just out in the middle of the woods.
Well, what a better place to have something like this.
I know.
It makes it more mysterious.
Yeah. It's not on some hilltop somewhere,
No.
It's buried in the middle of the woods. It's very cool.
And with that said, we will return after this quick break with my story that I'm excited about.
Hey, did you know? 30,000 years ago, humans sailed 140 miles from Taiwan to Japan's southern Yonaguni Island, navigating the Pacific Ocean's powerful Kuroshio currents. To prove it was possible, in 2019, a team of Japanese researchers used nothing but stone axes to cut down a 25-foot cedar and turn it into a canoe. Then, with zero modern navigational tools, the team of 4 men and 1 woman got into their canoe in eastern Taiwan and sailed for Japan. Using nothing but the sun and stars as a guide and the wind for power, they landed in Yonaguni, Japan, in just 45 hours. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we're back. And for my story tonight, I'm going to be telling you all about the Ohio Grassman. Written accounts of Bigfoot in Ohio go as far back as the 1800s. There were rumors that an entire group of early settlers vanished after writing strange entries in their journals about a beast in the forest. Then there was a man who was riding along in his carriage when a bipedal hairy monster tried to pull him out of it. The man was rescued by his quick-thinking daughter, who threw rocks at the creature until it ran off. But according to the Richland County History website, the most believable early account of the Ohio Bigfoot came from an unlikely source, one of the state's most beloved storytellers, Cy Gatton. Cyrus Gatton was a respected naturalist and woodsman who also had a knack for telling some really great folk tales and tall tales. But in 1899, he had an encounter with a Bigfoot that he didn't tell anyone about until about the 1930s. Unlike the colorful and exaggerated tall tales he was famous for, this story was told quietly and with no bravado. He said it was late summer, and he was a young man in his early 30s. He had decided to go berry picking by himself out behind his farm. It was a spot that he knew very, very well, but one that he hadn't told anyone else about because the berries were perfect, and he didn't want anyone else to know where it was. On this particular day, despite knowing the trails like the back of his hand, Cy somehow ended up lost. Eventually, he stumbled into his berry thicket, although he couldn't figure out how he had gotten there from the direction that he had came from. But the berries were gorgeous, so he decided to get picking, especially since he had somehow lost a lot of daylight and it was already becoming twilight. He had been bending over for quite a while picking his berries, and as he stood upright and turned to orient himself for the walk back home, he caught sight of a man standing just a dozen yards away from him. This other man seemed to be getting his bearings as well, and as he turned, he and Cy locked eyes. Now at first, Cy was annoyed that this stranger had found his berry patch, but then he realized that the man he was staring at couldn't possibly be a man. First of all, it was over 9 feet tall, and second, it was covered in long gray hair from head to toe. In the next few seconds, a million thoughts crossed Cy's mind, number one being, what was his escape route? Even though no bears had been seen in the area for over 50 years, Cy thought that the creature had to be one. But just as he decided that his best bet was to just walk slowly away, the creature turned on its heel and walked away instead. This creature, or whatever it was walking on 2 legs like a man, swinging its arms. It paused for just a second, casually glancing back over its shoulder at Cy, before it disappeared into the forest. Since then, Ohio is ranked 4th in the nation for Bigfoot sightings, and the creature has been reported in all 88 of Ohio's counties. So think about that. That's every county in Ohio. But in Ohio, Bigfoot is more commonly known as the Ohio Grassman because it's often seen in tall grasses. It's famous for building complex nests out of tall grass, and it allegedly eats mostly tall grass. So, he's a vegetarian Bigfoot. Who'd have thunk it?
That's fantastic.
Now, the most publicized of all Ohio Grassman sightings took place in Minerva, Ohio in 1978. But because it was the most publicized, the facts seemed to get a bit fuzzy. Since it seems like each time the story was retold in various newspapers, journals, magazines, and television programs, speculation and exaggeration were added bit by bit. Now, to just give you some idea, I came across 3 different spellings of the family's last name that was involved: Catton, Caton, and Clayton. So you can see where they're somewhat similar.
They are similar, yeah.
So I honestly don't even know which one is the right last name, but since Clayton seemed to show up the most, I'm going to go with that one. Now, according to an article in the Perry Tribune, Evelyn and Hal Clayton's grandchildren came running inside screaming about a monster that they had seen while they were playing in the yard. The Claytons decided to go outside and look for themselves. And standing next to their gravel pit was a 300-pound, 7-foot-tall, orange-eyed, bipedal creature covered in hair. The Grassman was pawing through the family's trash. Some accounts say that the Grassman let out a low, guttural growl before disappearing into the woods. Soon after, according to SouthernStyleSweetTeas.com, neighbors began talking about the Grassman, too, and how it was peering in their windows at them, clawing their livestock to death and following hikers along the trails. The local police were skeptical at first, but when people began reporting sightings of different-sized Grassman spotted in different places at the exact same time, they formed an armed posse, led by Sheriff Jake Thompson. They also brought cameras with them, and over the next several days, they caught actual glimpses of the creature. They found footprints and even tufts of hair caught on branches. One night, as they sat around their campfire, they all heard a very strange sound. It was a mix between a scream and a roar. They all sat perfectly still as the unnerving cries came closer and closer, until suddenly their campsite was thrown into darkness. The Ohio Grassman was so close to them that its shadow was blocking out their campfire light. Sheriff Thompson actually locked eyes with the creature, but as he slowly raised his gun, the Ohio Grassman turned and ran. Now, as you can imagine, once the story hit the newspapers, people came from all over the country to try and see the Grassman for themselves. According to the Perry Tribune, Herbert Clayton was quoted as saying, "One day there were 100 to 150 cars in my driveway, on my lawn, and lining both sides of the road." And the newspapers printed conflicting stories. Some said that the Ohio Grassman was the most aggressive Bigfoot species discovered so far, and that it had killed the Clayton's dog. Others said the Ohio Grassman was gentle and non-threatening, preferring to run away from humans as soon as he saw them.
Well, that's what it sounds like. I mean, so far he's just turned and walked away from everybody.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a big teddy bear. I mean, come on, he's a vegetarian, of all things. He's not a meat eater.
Right, so he doesn't really have any reason to be aggressive. It's not like he's fighting for prey.
Right. Over the next several months, more evidence was collected, including tapes of Grassman vocalizations, more footprints, and sketches of the creature based on witness testimony. It was the general consensus that the town of Minerva was dealing with an entire family group of Bigfoot, not just one solitary creature. But as winter set in, the Ohio Grassman sightings dwindled and then stopped, although sightings would continue throughout the state for the next 50 years. And to prove it, I decided to go to Beth's favorite online database of all time, the BFRO website.
Woohoo! I love the BFRO.
I know, it's a great place to find anything about Bigfoot sightings.
Anywhere in the country. Well, anywhere on the North American continent, because they have Canada too.
Right. The first really interesting report that I found came from Somerset in Perry County, Ohio, the same summer as the Minerva sightings. The witness, who was 10 or 11 years old at the time, remembered playing Explorer out in the woods with 3 other friends. She said it suddenly got very quiet, but they continued to walk single file along a deer trail with the witness in the lead. Out of nowhere, they all began to smell something awful. And as the witness came around a tree, she stopped dead in her tracks to keep from running into something. It was over 6 feet tall, covered in dark brown hair or fur, and just as startled as she was. She screamed and told the other kids to run. The creature, which she said had an almost human-like face, spun around on its heels and took off in the opposite direction.
Can you imagine? You come around a tree and almost bump chests with a freaking Bigfoot.
Especially being a kid.
Yeah.
Because this thing would be towering over you.
Yeah.
And it smells funny. You know?
Right.
I'd be like, don't touch me. Don't get that on me. But like the Minerva incident, it turned around and just fleed away.
Right.
So it's as just afraid of us as we are of it.
So far, yeah.
But with that said, there have been much more recent sightings also. Like in 2017, when there were no less than 10 major encounters all across the state. Now, I think that it would be really interesting to plot them out on a map, since most of them are over 100 miles apart. So like I said, there were 10 major encounters in 2017. But first, I'm going to start with the Salt Fork State Park in Guernsey County. In 2017, countless campers reported hearing strange howls at night and seeing human-like shadows pass by their tents. Some reported that rocks were thrown at them. The Cincinnati Enquirer ran an article in 2017 about the encounters, which focused on 2 men named Eric and Nathan, who said that they had seen the creature. When asked to describe it, they gave the classic Bigfoot description, with Nathan adding, quote, "Seeing the creature was scary. When I couldn't see it anymore, that was terrifying."
That's a great quote.
It is.
I mean, I feel bad for him because he experienced something that frightening. But think about that. When you can see it, you're like, holy shit. But then when you can't see it, you're like, oh my God, where the frick is it?
I know.
Right?
I don't know which is worse. A hunter's trail camera in the Hocking Hills area caught some interesting footage in August of that year. The trail cam footage showed what looked like a large, hairy, upright creature moving silently through the trees in the middle of the night. A few months earlier, residents in Bellefontaine, Ohio, began complaining about eerie howls coming from their woods at night. One resident described it as a mix between a human scream and a wolf's howl that vibrated throughout the trees. Now for another encounter, fishermen who were enjoying a day at Cedar Creek Lake came across 16-inch long footprints along the bank. Heavy rain made it impossible for them to take plaster casts, but they did get some pictures. Then, in Coshocton County, a motorist driving along a secluded wooded road at dusk claimed that a 7 or 8 foot tall hairy bipedal creature crossed the road in front of them. Almost 64 miles away, campers staying in the Wayne National Forest also had a weird experience in the middle of the night. They were startled by tree knocks, suddenly echoing all around them. Feeling rather bold, they knocked back, only to be met by even more knocks. These ones sounded aggressive and closer. Freaked out, they decided to pack up and leave. 85 miles away, in Mohican State Park, another group of campers were taking a nighttime hike through the woods when they were certain a dark, shadowy figure was following them. They could see it sticking to the tree line, trying to stay hidden. When one of the hikers shined their flashlight towards the figure, it took off. Tree structures were discovered by several groups of hikers in the summer of 2017 in Zielinski State Forest, about 102 miles away from Mohican State Park. These structures were made of carefully interwoven sticks and branches, which could not have happened naturally. But the Ohio Grassman wasn't just spotted that year in the woods. A farmer in Knox County claimed that one night his dog started barking wildly, and when he went out to investigate, he saw a tall bipedal creature walking through his cornfield. Now at first, he assumed it was a human, but due to the dog's frantic reaction and the creature's height and walking speed, he knew that it had to be something else. And lastly, there was the 2017 Ohio Bigfoot Conference itself, which was held in Salt Fork State Park. Throughout the conference, participants reported tree knocks, rocks being thrown, and shadowy figures. But, like I had said before, Ohio is the fourth in the country for Bigfoot sightings, and for good reason, since the sightings just keep going on and on. According to the BFRO website, in September of 2020, a woman named Amber and her husband were walking their dog along the trails in the General Store Trail System campground in the Wayne National Forest near Shawnee and Perry County. They had been walking their dog there for years, and each time they went out, they'd hear tree knocks, which she said that they really never paid much attention to. Then, more recently, they began noticing small trees that were broken and uprooted in strange ways. But this time, they couldn't ignore what they experienced. It was around 4:30 in the afternoon, and as they walked, they began hearing strange howling. Neither of them had ever heard anything like it before. A few days later, while walking the same trail, they stopped to let their dog have some water. As they stood there, Amber heard rustling up on the ridge, and when she turned to look, she saw a large bipedal creature walking through the brush. She said that it had dark-colored fur or hair, but it was way too far to clearly see its facial features. So she called her husband to look, but when she did, the creature took off. She said in her report that this sighting bothered her for months. And then in February of 2021, while she was taking a video of her dog along the same trail, she inadvertently recorded the sound of tree knocks at the same time.
That's cool.
It is. So, either this is a place that this Ohio Grassman hangs out, or if she walks this all the time, maybe it's somewhat interested in her and her dog's behavior.
Yeah. And it's not aggressive in any way.
Not at all. In October of 2020, Halloween weekend to be exact, a group of 10 people rented a cabin in the Hocking Hills area of Perry County, near the city of Logan, to celebrate Debbie Robinson's 51st birthday. On October 30th, the entire group noticed a really nasty smell outside the cabin. But since they couldn't figure out where it was coming from, they all went back to bed, except for 2 of them, who stayed out on the deck to talk. Around midnight, the 2 people started hearing branches cracking near the cabin, and then something was thrown at them. Now, initially, they thought it was one of their friends pranking them, But when a very loud crash happened right next to where they were sitting, they ran inside. The two of them woke everyone else up to tell them that something was happening outside. So now the entire group was looking out the windows. They also turned all the lights on inside. Now at first, they didn't see anything. But then, standing in the field, right outside the kitchen window, was a large black figure. The group all started yelling, and the creature took off. The group then went up to the second-story balcony to see if they could still see it. And that's when the howling started, followed by more branches breaking. The following morning, they found a giant footprint in front of the cabin. Now, if that report sounds familiar, I think it was included in the Small Town Monsters Bigfoot documentary, On the Trail of Bigfoot. Filmmaker Seth Breedlove has done several Bigfoot-themed documentaries in Ohio.
We watched a really, really good series, Bigfoot series, and I think that story was included.
I believe it was.
Because it does sound familiar to me.
Very similar.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite encounter stories was also featured in a Canton Repository article. This encounter happened in June 2011 near the Oak Hill Trailhead. An unnamed woman said, quote, "I saw a Bigfoot from the chest up below my house. It was in a wooded ravine below my house. It arrived there with a great deal of crashing and breaking down of trees. I was looking to see what was coming when it stood up and looked at me. It had grayish-brown long hair, particularly over the face, wide-set eyes, ears on the side of the head, and a huge chest and shoulder. It looked at me for maybe 1 minute, and then it went back down into the ravine. After that, it stayed around here all summer, and I'd often hear it calling, smashing rocks together, knocking on trees, and one day it sneezed a lot." End quote. Well, it is a Bigfoot, and it is a vegetarian, so perhaps it got a hold of some flowers that just didn't agree with its nose.
I could see it sitting in a field and playing with dandelions, and all the little dandelion stuff is going over
the Bigfoot's nose,
yes.
Tickling it and sneezing. You know, that could be a possibility.
You don't hear that very often.
I've never heard that, ever.
That's pretty cool.
A Bigfoot sneeze?
Yeah, repeatedly.
I'd like to hear a Bigfoot fart. Wouldn't you? Can you imagine?
That was a pretty, I'm guessing that was a pretty accurate.
Perhaps. It's not always a Bigfoot growl. Perhaps when the smell is accompanied, well, perhaps that's a Bigfoot fart.
Oh my gosh, you're onto something.
I think so.
I'd never thought of that before.
What a Bigfoot gets a hold of one of these dandelions, as you say. It goes up its nose, and you know how it is. I mean, it tickles his nose, and he farts all of a sudden.
Because his nose was tickled?
Yeah, you know when you you as an older woman knows that when you laugh, sometimes you pee your pants,
oh
right?
My God, why are you announcing that to everyone? Why would you do that?
Because you question my theory about Bigfoot sniffing a dandelion, getting up his nose, and farting.
I wasn't questioning. I was trying to understand how tickling his nose was making him fart.
Well, if you tickle somebody, they could fart. Or they could pee their pants.
They would pee themselves.
So it is possible.
Right.
Okay. Well, enough with that nonsense, right? It's just a theory. One of my goofy theories that, I come across once in a while.
I was going to say one of your better theories, but we can go with goofy.
So that's not something you hear a lot about.
Sneezing Bigfoot.
Yeah.
No.
So the Ohio Grassman, it may be a vegetarian, it may be shy, or it may be aggressive. I guess it all depends on which one you run into, what your own mindset is about Bigfoot, and what perspective is afterwards. But Ohio is definitely the place to go if you want to encounter a Bigfoot. A friendly Bigfoot.
A vegetarian sneezing Bigfoot.
A vegetarian sneezing, farting Bigfoot.
There's no evidence that it was a farting Bigfoot.
There is that awful smell.
Oh, well, that's true.
We don't know if Bigfoot smells bad or he's just passing a lot of gas, because it would make sense if he's a vegetarian. Right? I'm not a vegetarian. I don't know, but I would imagine they fart a lot.
Oh, why would you assume that?
I don't know. You know, when you're leaving that 5-star rating, you could leave a comment if you are a vegetarian. Let us all know if you fart a lot.
Oh, my God. That's a heck of a way to get a 5-star rating. Jeez.
It's a comment. Well, Beth, I think that about wraps it up for this episode.
I think so. I think I need to cut you off the mic.
Join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.